Power is not inherited. It is not gifted. It is taken. And it is taken by those who understand a fundamental truth that most refuse to accept. The world does not reward the honest. It rewards the strategic. The question is not whether manipulation exists in your life. It already does. The question is, are you the one wielding it, or are you the one being wielded? Throughout history, one name has become synonymous with the dark arts of influence and control: Niccolo Machiavelli. A 16th century diplomat who dared to write what others only whispered. His works were banned, burned, and condemned by the church. Why? Because he revealed the mechanisms by which power actually operates, stripped of all moral decoration. He showed us that beneath every crown, every empire, every carefully constructed reputation lies a web of calculated moves. Today, we're not here to judge Machiavelli. We're here to understand him, to extract from his writings and the writings of those who followed his path a manual for navigating the invisible battlefield of human interaction. This is not a simple list. This is a journey into the architecture of control itself. By the end of this video, you will see social dynamics differently. You will recognize the patterns. You will understand the game, and most importantly, you will know how to play it. The knowledge you're about to receive is not for the faint of heart. It is transformational, yes. But transformation always comes with a price: the loss of innocence. Once you see these mechanisms, you cannot unsee them. Once you understand how easily perception is manipulated, you will never trust appearances again. Are you ready? Then let's begin. The first principle of power is counterintuitive, and that's precisely why it works. Always let them underestimate you. Enter every room last. Observe before you speak. Attack only when they believe you are harmless. This is not weakness. This is camouflage. Why does this work? Because human beings are pattern recognition machines with a fatal flaw. We judge quickly and adjust slowly. When someone appears unimpressive at first glance, we file them away as irrelevant. We stop watching them. We stop defending against them. And in that moment of dismissal, they gain their greatest advantage: invisibility. History is littered with the victories of the underestimated. Julius Caesar played the fool in his youth, allowing rivals to ignore him until he had built an unstoppable coalition. Robert Greene writes about this extensively: the power of playing weaker than you are. In modern business, this manifests as the startup that appears small until it dominates the market. In office politics, it's the quiet employee who suddenly emerges as indispensable because no one saw them accumulating influence. Here's your actionable path. In your next important meeting, resist the urge to demonstrate your intelligence immediately. Ask simple questions. Let others speak first. Absorb the room's dynamics. Note who defers to whom, who interrupts, who gets nervous. Then, when you do speak, you'll have information they don't know you possess. Second, never correct every mistake you see. When someone underestimates your knowledge, that's data. Store it. Use it later when the stakes are higher. The second law goes deeper into the machinery of perception. Charm is more dangerous than truth. Build an illusion so persuasive that people prefer it to reality. Being perceived as good is infinitely more useful than being honest. Truth is rigid. Charm is fluid. Truth creates resistance. Charm dissolves it. This works because of a fundamental principle in psychology. People don't respond to who you are. They respond to how you make them feel. Neuroscience confirms this. The emotional brain processes information faster than the rational brain. By the time someone logically analyzes you, they've already felt something. And feelings, not facts, drive decisions. Machiavelli wrote that it's better to appear merciful, faithful, humane, and religious than to actually be these things. Why? Because the appearance is what people see, judge, and remember. In today's world, this is your personal brand. It's your social media presence. It's the carefully curated image you present, in professional settings. The most successful people understand that authenticity is a tool, not a virtue. They choose which authentic version to show based on the context. Mark Zuckerberg wears hoodies to appear relatable. Politicians kiss babies not because they love children, but because the image creates trust. Your action items master the art of active listening, not to understand, but to gather intelligence about what someone wants to hear. Mirror their values back to them. If someone values innovation, frame your ideas as cutting edge. If they value tradition, frame the same ideas as time-tested. Second, cultivate one signature trait that makes you memorable in a positive way: generosity, reliability, or humor. But make it calculated. Every act of kindness should serve a strategic purpose, even if that purpose is simply building a reservoir of goodwill you can draw from later. The third principle is about psychological warfare through confusion. Create ambiguity of purpose. Be a puzzle. Cold one day, generous the next. Distant in one moment, intimate in another. Confusion generates obsession. When people cannot predict you, they cannot stop thinking about you. This exploits a deep human need, the need for closure and pattern completion. Our brains hate uncertainty. Studies in behavioral economics show that humans prefer a known negative outcome over an unknown one. When you deny someone the ability to categorize you, you create a gap in their mental model. That gap becomes filled with attention. They study you. They replay interactions. They seek to solve the mystery of who you are. And in that seeking, you occupy their mind, rent-free. Look at how this plays out in modern dating culture. The person who texts back immediately becomes predictable, therefore less interesting. The one who maintains inconsistent response times creates anxiety, which the brain misinterprets as excitement. In business, companies like Apple create ambiguity through secrecy. Every product launch is an event because no one knows what's coming. The speculation itself generates billions in free marketing. Here's how you apply this. Break your patterns deliberately. If you always help someone, refuse once with no explanation. If you're consistently serious, show unexpected vulnerability. If you're warm, go cold briefly. Don't explain these shifts. Let others wonder. Second, when people ask about your plans or motivations, give them pieces, never the whole picture. Say enough to be intriguing, not enough to be understood. The moment you're fully understood, you lose leverage. The fourth law is about information asymmetry. Control what they see, hide what you do. Your output can be public. Your input, your strategy, your true process must be private. Never reveal the plan before the infrastructure is built. Never explain your methods. Why is this crucial? Because knowledge is zero-sum in competitive environments. If others know your strategy, they can counter it. If they see your preparation, they can block it. Machiavelli advised that a prince should be like a fox and a lion, but the fox part matters more: cunning and concealment. Sun Tzu's Art of War echoes this. All warfare is based on deception. Even when you mean to attack, you must seem incapable. In the modern era, this is data privacy, trade secrets, and strategic silence. Elon Musk doesn't announce every move before execution. Jeff Bezos built Amazon's infrastructure for years before competitors understood the scale of the threat. In your personal life, this means not announcing your job search until you have an offer, not sharing your business idea until you've filed the paperwork, not revealing your next move in a negotiation until the contract is signed. Practical application. Create a separation between your public persona and your private strategy. Let people see results, not processes. When you succeed, let others speculate about how, but never explain fully. Second, stop oversharing. Every piece of information you give is a piece someone can use. Keep your plans, your struggles, and your methods private until they're irreversible. The element of surprise is one of the few advantages that cannot be taken from you unless you surrender it through premature revelation. The fifth principle introduces a sophisticated psychological mechanism. Build a mask, then let it crack. Perfection is forgettable because it's inhuman. People cannot relate to flawlessness. But a carefully calculated flaw, that creates connection, that creates addiction, that creates mystery. This works through a phenomenon psychologists call the pratfall effect. Research shows that competent individuals who commit minor blunders are rated as more likable than those who appear perfect. Why? Because imperfection signals humanity and accessibility. But here's the Machiavellian twist. The flaw must be deliberate. It must be controlled. You show one crack in the armor, just enough to make people think they've seen the real you, while the fortress remains impenetrable. Consider how this manifests in public figures. The billionaire who wears the same outfit daily, the politician who admits one carefully chosen past mistake. These aren't accidents. They're calculated humanizing touches that make the power structure more palatable. It's the Instagram influencer who posts one no-makeup photo amid hundreds of curated images. The crack makes the mask more believable. Your implementation: choose one deliberate imperfection to display. Perhaps you're forgetful about small things, or you have one relatable bad habit. This minor flaw makes everything else about you seem more genuine by contrast. But never let them see a flaw that actually matters. Never show weakness in areas where you need respect. The crack in the mask should be cosmetic, not structural. Second, when you achieve something significant, admit that one small thing went wrong. This makes the success seem more earned and makes you seem more honest, even as you maintain total control. The sixth law is perhaps the simplest, yet the most violated. Speak always less than necessary, use silence to create discomfort, and force others to fill the void. In that filling, they reveal themselves. Words are a liability. Silence is an asset. This principle operates on multiple levels. First, there's the psychological pressure. Humans are social creatures terrified of awkward silence. When you refuse to fill conversational gaps, the other person experiences anxiety. To resolve that anxiety, they talk. And in talking more than they intended, they give you information, leverage, and advantage. Second, words are commitments. Everything you say can be used to hold you accountable, to predict your next move, or to catch you in contradiction. What you don't say can never be used against you. Machiavelli himself wrote sparsely in The Prince, leaving readers to infer and interpret. This ambiguity has kept scholars debating for centuries, which keeps his ideas alive. In modern negotiation, this is standard practice. The first person to name a price often loses. The one who can sit in silence wields power. Sales professionals know that after making a pitch, stay quiet. The prospect's response in that silence tells you everything. Here's your directive. In conversations, especially important ones, consciously speak 30% less than you normally would. Ask more questions. Give shorter answers. Let silence linger after someone speaks before you respond. This pause suggests you're thinking deeply, which makes your eventual words carry more weight. Second, never explain yourself unless absolutely necessary. Justification is weakness. When you over-explain, you signal insecurity. State your position and stop. Let others project their interpretations onto your silence. The seventh principle ventures into darker territory. Blur the line between threat and ally. Be warm enough that the enemy relaxes. Be ambiguous enough that they never feel completely safe. Attack precisely when they've convinced themselves you're neutral or friendly. This works because humans categorize for efficiency. Friend or foe, safe or dangerous. Once someone has placed you in the friendly category, their guard drops. They share more, they trust more, they don't prepare defenses. This is when they're most vulnerable. Machiavelli observed that injuries should be inflicted all at once so they're felt less deeply, while benefits should be given gradually so they're felt more deeply. The implication? Make them comfortable before you strike. In modern corporate warfare, this is the friendly acquisition that turns hostile, the partnership that becomes a takeover. In personal dynamics, it's the colleague who seems supportive until they take credit for your work at the crucial moment. It's the friend who learns all your weaknesses through intimacy, then exploits them during a conflict. Unethical? Perhaps. Effective? History says yes. Application in your life. Never reveal your complete stance to potential competitors. Maintain cordial relations even with those you oppose. Help them occasionally so they categorize you as safe. Meanwhile, document everything. Build your case. Prepare your move. When the moment comes to advance your position at their expense, the contrast between your friendly facade and your decisive action will leave them unable to respond effectively. Second, recognize when others are doing this to you. If someone is unusually helpful without clear benefit to themselves, question their motives. True allies are consistent. Manipulators are convenient. The eighth law is about timing and betrayal. Make them feel secure before taking power. Validate their choices. Guide their thinking. Protect them from smaller threats so they trust you against the larger one, which is you. The betrayal must occur only when their trust is absolute, when they've stopped watching you as a threat. Why does this work? Because humans are cognitive misers. We don't have the energy to be suspicious of everyone all the time. We selectively allocate our vigilance. Once someone has proven themselves safe over time, we stop monitoring them. This is both necessary for social function and exploitable for those who understand it. In psychology, this is called trust decay of vigilance. The longer someone appears trustworthy, the less we question them. History is built on this. Brutus was Caesar's friend. The Trojan horse was a gift. Every major betrayal in history followed a period of established trust. In business, this is the executive who loyally serves for years, learning every company secret before leaving to start a competing firm with all that inside knowledge. In personal relationships, it's the long game of manipulation where someone shapes your decisions gradually until you're dependent on their guidance. Your strategic path. If you need something from someone, invest in their trust first. Make small sacrifices that cost you little but signal loyalty. Defend them in minor conflicts. Provide real value initially. Only when they've stopped questioning your motives do you make your actual move. The contrast between the established pattern of support and the final betrayal creates paralysis. They won't see it coming because the preceding behavior has trained them not to look. Second, protect yourself from this by maintaining healthy skepticism, even toward longtime associates. Trust, but verify, always. The ninth principle creates psychological addiction through withdrawal. Create dependency, then remove yourself. Become so integrated into someone's success, happiness, or daily function that your absence creates a desperate void. Then vanish. This exploits attachment theory and loss aversion. Humans feel the pain of loss approximately twice as intensely as the pleasure of equivalent gain. When you make yourself indispensable, then withdraw, you're not just removing a benefit, you're creating active suffering. That void screams to be filled. Suddenly, the person who was merely useful becomes desperately needed. Your value multiplies. Consider how this operates in relationships. The partner who is always available becomes taken for granted. The one who is sometimes unreachable becomes precious. In business, employees who make themselves the sole knowledge holder of critical processes gain power through that dependency. Tech companies do this at scale, create products people integrate into their daily lives, then threaten to remove features or raise prices. The dependency has already been built. Leaving is now costly. Implementation. Gradually become the solution to someone's recurring problem. Solve it so well they stop maintaining backup options. Once that dependency is established, become less available. Don't disappear entirely at first. Just introduce uncertainty. Make them wonder if you'll still be there. This creates anxiety that raises your perceived value. Then, return briefly, providing relief. This cycle of withdrawal and return conditions them to appreciate and pursue your presence. Second, never allow yourself to become dependent on a single person, system, or opportunity. Maintain options. Dependency is only powerful when it's asymmetrical. If you need them as much as they need you, you have no leverage. The 10th law transforms generosity into weaponized obligation. Weaponize the favor. Help people strategically to create leverage, not gratitude. The goal is to make them feel indebted, not grateful. Gratitude fades. Debt persists. Psychological debt is the foundation of control. This works because of reciprocity, one of the strongest social norms. Robert Cialdini's research shows that humans feel an overwhelming need to repay debts, even when the initial favor was unsolicited. But here's where it gets Machiavellian. The most effective favors are those that feel slightly uncomfortable for the recipient. Too small, and it's dismissible. Too large, and it feels like a manipulation. The perfect favor is significant enough to create obligation, but framed as casual enough to make refusal awkward. In practice, this is doing someone a favor they didn't ask for, making it public enough that refusing to reciprocate would damage their reputation. It's the business connection who introduces you to someone valuable, then later calls in that debt for something far more consequential. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately. He wrote that mercenaries and auxiliaries are useless, but obligated allies are valuable. The difference? Obligation. Your action plan. When you help someone, do it in a way that makes the debt clear but unstated. Keep a mental ledger. Remember who owes you even if you appear magnanimous. When you need something, frame the request as reciprocity, not as a new favor. Say things like, "Remember when I connected you with that client?" Second, be extremely careful about accepting favors from people you don't fully trust. Every favor carries an invisible price tag. Sometimes the cost of saying no up front is lower than the cost of the eventual reciprocity they'll demand. If you must accept, repay immediately to close the obligation loop before it can be weaponized. The 11th principle is about creating unbreakable loyalty through shared guilt. Fabricate loyalty through complicity. Get people to betray others, break rules, or compromise their own ethics for your benefit. Once they've done something questionable with you, they're bound to you. The tide tail creates more loyalty than kindness ever could. Why is this so powerful? Because humans need to maintain a consistent self-image. When someone does something morally questionable, they experience cognitive dissonance. To resolve this discomfort, they must justify the action. The easiest justification is that the person they did it for must be worth it, must be special, must deserve that loyalty. This is called effort justification. The more someone sacrifices for you, especially morally, the more they convince themselves you're worthy of it. This is how criminal organizations work. Initiation rituals involve crimes that create complicity. Once someone has blood on their hands for the group, leaving becomes psychological impossible. It would mean accepting they did evil for nothing. In corporate settings, this is asking someone to fudge numbers slightly, to stay quiet about an ethical violation, to participate in a questionable decision. That shared secret becomes a chain. In personal relationships, it's making someone choose you over their other commitments, forcing them to burn bridges to prove loyalty. How you use this? When you need someone's allegiance, create situations where they must make small compromises for you. Ask them to bend a rule, to keep a secret that's slightly uncomfortable, to defend you in a morally gray situation. Each compromise deepens the bond. Each shared secret is another lock on the chain. But be warned, this is a dark tool. It creates loyalty based on fear of exposure, not genuine connection. Those are chains that can shatter violently if the person decides the weight is too great. Second, Recognize when someone is using this on you. If someone asks you to do something questionable early in a relationship, they may be manufacturing complicity. Refuse. It's easier to say no to the first compromise than to the 10th. The 12th law teaches you to destroy from within. Break alliances from within. Never attack a unified group directly. Instead, infiltrate doubt, plant suspicion, highlight latent conflicts. Let them destroy themselves while you remain distant, your hands clean. This works because every alliance has cracks. Every group has underlying tensions, competing interests, and suppressed conflicts. Unity is always temporary and requires energy to maintain. By amplifying existing doubts, you don't create division, you simply accelerate what's already there. Machiavelli understood that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. So don't attack kingdoms, divide them first. In Game of Thrones terms, this is Littlefinger's entire strategy. In real geopolitics, it's how intelligence agencies operate, find existing factions, and give each reasons to distrust the other. In business, it's how larger companies destroy startup coalitions. They don't compete directly. They offer better deals to one member, creating suspicion among the others. In office politics, it's planting the idea that credit isn't being shared fairly, that someone is working behind others' backs. Your implementation. When facing unified opposition, don't push against them as a block. Find the weakest link, the member with the most to lose or the most to gain from defection. Approach them privately. Give them information that makes them question their allies' motives. You don't need to lie. Usually highlighting uncomfortable truths is enough. Didn't you notice you did most of the work but they took equal credit? Once doubt is planted, the group's energy turns inward. They fight each other, not you. Second, protect your own alliances by addressing conflicts directly and early. The reason this tactic works is because most groups ignore small tensions until they explode. Be the exception. Air grievances early so there's no festering wound for an enemy to infect. The 13th principle is about becoming a psychological mirror. Reflect their insecurities. Use carefully crafted compliments that validate someone's internal fears, making you the only voice they trust. This isn't about obvious flattery. It's about surgical precision in understanding what someone doubts about themselves, then positioning yourself as the one who sees their hidden value. This works through a concept called unique validation. Generic compliments are dismissed because anyone could give them. But when you compliment someone on something they're insecure about, something they don't think others notice, you become special. You become the person who really sees them. Suddenly, your opinion matters more than others. You've hacked their need for validation. Watch how this operates in cults. Leaders identify what followers feel is missing in their lives: purpose, belonging, recognition. Then they provide exactly that, becoming the irreplaceable source of the follower's identity. In romantic manipulation, this is love bombing that targets specific insecurities. In professional settings, it's the mentor who identifies exactly what their mentee doubts about themselves and provides seemingly sincere reassurance, creating a bond of dependence. Here's your tactical approach. Listen for what people mention repeatedly or defensively. These are their insecurities. The person who constantly mentions their work ethic is insecure about their competence. The one who emphasizes their honesty may have been called dishonest. Once you identify the insecurity, validate it specifically, not in a shallow way, but with examples and observations. I've noticed how you approach problems. There's a thoroughness most people miss. This creates a perception that you understand them uniquely. Second, use this knowledge to become their sounding board. When someone sees you as the only one who truly understands them, they'll share everything, giving you complete information access and influence over their decisions. We've covered the foundational principles. You've learned to move through social spaces like a ghost, underestimated, charming, ambiguous, hidden. You've learned to create psychological bonds that others don't recognize as chains: dependency, obligation, complicity, and validation. These are the defensive and positioning tactics, the art of becoming formidable without appearing so. But we're only halfway through this journey. Everything so far has been about preparation, building the architecture of influence, establishing position without triggering resistance. Now we enter different territory, more dangerous territory. The tactics that follow are not about positioning, they're about action. They're about how to execute, how to strike, how to reshape reality itself while remaining in the shadows. If the first half taught you to be the fox, cunning and unseen, the second half teaches you to be the lion, decisive and overwhelming. But a lion that attacks from the darkness, a lion whose claws are wielded by others. The next principles are not for the weak of heart or the morally rigid. They require accepting that power operates below the surface of civility. If you're still with me, you're ready. Let's continue. The 14th law is fundamental to all sophisticated power plays. Never hold the knife. Keep your hands clean. Orchestrate chaos. Engineer outcomes. But let third parties execute the dirty work. Be the inevitable alternative, never the obvious aggressor. This principle is about plausible deniability and moral insulation. When you personally execute an attack, several things happen. You create a direct enemy, you bear the moral weight, you become vulnerable to retaliation, and you limit your own options. But when others do your work, you remain above the conflict. You can even position yourself as the peacemaker, the solution to the problem you created. Machiavelli advised princes to use others for actions that create resentment. In modern politics, this is legislative maneuvering where unpopular measures are proposed by willing sacrificial allies, while the true architect remains clean. In business, it's restructuring where consultants recommend layoffs, not executives. The message is delivered by someone expendable. In personal vendettas, it's arranging circumstances so that your enemy's own actions or someone else's reasonable response becomes their undoing. Your strategy: when you need an unpleasant action taken, find someone who benefits from it independently or who can be positioned as having their own motives. Let their interest align with your goal. Provide them with information or opportunity, then step back. When questioned, you can honestly say you didn't do it. Someone else made that choice. Second, create systems and policies that enforce outcomes you want so that the system, not you, becomes the villain. I'd love to help, but the policy doesn't allow it. You made the policy, but the policy makes the decision. This is institutional manipulation at its finest. The 15th principle leverages silence as an offensive weapon. Say nothing and let them reveal everything. Use silence as an interrogation tool. The absence of your reaction forces others to talk more, to fill the void, to expose their thinking, their fears, and their plans. This works because humans are pattern-seeking explanation machines. When we can't read someone's reaction, we become anxious. That anxiety seeks resolution through more information sharing. We over-explain. We reveal things we didn't intend to. Police interrogators know this. After asking a question, stay quiet. Suspects fill the silence with more information than they meant to give. Therapists use this too. Strategic silence prompts deeper disclosure. In negotiations, the person who speaks first after a proposal usually loses. In conflicts, the one who rushes to explain or defend shows their weak points. In gathering intelligence, simply raising an eyebrow and waiting often gets you more information than asking follow-up questions. Your silence is their anxiety, and their anxiety is your advantage. Application. In any situation where you need information, ask one clear question, then stop. Do not fill the silence. Do not nod encouragingly. Do not help them find words. Just wait. Let the discomfort build. Most people will say far more than they intended. Second, When accused or confronted, resist the urge to immediately defend yourself. A long pause before responding signals confidence and makes the accuser doubt themselves. They often reveal more about their position while you're thinking. Sometimes they'll even argue against themselves, offering you defenses you hadn't thought of. The 16th law is about destroying prediction. Be unpredictable when it matters. Break your own patterns deliberately. Uncertainty prevents enemies from preparing defenses. If they cannot predict you, they cannot protect against you. This works because strategy depends on prediction. Military commanders study enemy patterns. Negotiators rely on historical behavior. Personal opponents use your consistency against you. When you're predictable, you're controllable. Randomness, selectively applied, breaks this. It forces others to prepare for everything, which means they're prepared for nothing. They spread resources thin. They waste energy on false alarms. But here's the key. Be predictable in unimportant matters, unpredictable in crucial ones. If you're randomly chaotic in everything, people just avoid you as unstable. But if you're reliable in small things, then suddenly deviate on important issues, the shock is magnified. They weren't watching. They weren't ready. In warfare, this is feinting. You establish a pattern, then break it at the decisive moment. In business, it's companies that follow industry norms for years, then suddenly pivot into a completely different strategy. Competitors can't react in time. Your tactical use? Establish reliable patterns in visible but low-stakes behaviors. Be punctual, follow certain routines, maintain consistent preferences in minor matters. This creates a false sense that you're predictable. Then, in high-stakes situations, do the unexpected. Take the aggressive path when they expect diplomacy. Retreat when they expect a fight. Collaborate when they expect competition. The contrast creates paralysis. Second, study your own patterns. What do you always do in certain situations? Those are vulnerabilities. Someone who knows you can exploit those patterns. Deliberately break them in practice situations so you're capable of unpredictability when it matters. The 17th principle is about creating absence that echoes. Make your presence felt in your absence. Establish such a high standard of competence or such a distinctive impact that people think of you even when you're not in the room. Your influence should linger like a fragrance. This works through several mechanisms. First, there's the psychological concept of availability heuristic. If someone comes to mind easily, they're perceived as important. By creating strong associations, you become the mental reference point. Second, there's social proof. If everyone mentions you when you're not there, you gain status without effort. Third, there's the scarcity principle. Things that are rare are valued more. If you're not always available, your presence becomes special. Think about how this manifests. The executive whose standards are so high that teams ask, what would they think, even when they're on vacation? The friend who's mentioned in conversations they're not part of because their perspective is valued. The competitor who's so formidable that business discussions include, how would X respond to this? You've transcended physical presence. You've become an idea, a standard, a ghost that haunts their decisions. Implementation. Create signature approaches or standards that become associated with you. Do something so consistently well that your absence is noticed immediately. Be the person who asks the question others didn't think of, who spots the detail everyone missed, who has the insight that changes directions. Do this enough, and you become the reference point. Second, make your exits memorable. Don't fade from situations. Leave with impact. A final statement, a decisive action, a memorable moment. The last interaction someone has with you colors how they remember you until the next one. Make it count. The 18th law is about fear without fingerprints. Never threaten explicitly. Let fear do the work for you. Explicit threats trigger resistance and create evidence. Implied consequences are more powerful because imagination is always darker than reality. This works because of how human fear operates. When you explicitly threaten, you define the boundaries of danger. People can assess risk and decide to resist. But when you're silent, when consequences are merely suggested by your presence or reputation, the target's imagination fills in the blanks. And imagination, fueled by anxiety, always conjures worse scenarios than you'd actually execute. Their own mind becomes your weapon. History's most effective power brokers understood this. The organized crime boss who never states threats, but whose reputation ensures compliance. The corporate leader whose silent disapproval means more than others' explicit anger. The parent whose mere look controls behavior without words. This is power at its most refined. Enforcement through reputation rather than action. Your approach. Build a reputation for following through on your position. Then, let that reputation speak. If you say you'll do something, do it. If you set a boundary, enforce it. Do this consistently in small matters so that in large matters you don't need to threaten. People know. Second, when someone crosses a line, don't engage in angry threats. Instead, go quiet. Pull back. Let your silence and withdrawal signal that consequences are coming. The uncertainty of not knowing when or how is more destabilizing than a defined threat. They'll spend energy in anxious anticipation while you calmly plan. The 19th principle is about patience as a weapon. Delay revenge until it's devastating. Never react in the heat of the moment. When someone wrongs you, smile, note it, then wait. Wait until they've relaxed. Wait until they think you've forgotten. Wait until the perfect moment when your response will be clean, complete, and final. This works for several reasons. First, immediate retaliation is expected. Guards are up. Evidence is fresh. Allies are mobilized. Your response will be less effective. But time makes people careless. They lower defenses. They forget details. They make new mistakes. Second, delayed response doesn't feel like revenge. It feels like justice. You've had time to plan, so your action appears measured rather than emotional. Third, the psychological impact is deeper. Your target experiences paranoia during the waiting period if they're aware you know, or complete shock if they thought they'd gotten away with it. Either way, you win. Look at how this plays out in history. Michael Corleone in The Godfather waits years before settling all family business at once. Real-world corporate takeovers often follow this pattern, endure hostile actions, appear weak, accumulate resources and positioning, then execute a sudden, devastating countermove years later. By then, the original aggressor has forgotten to watch their back. Your execution. When wronged, your first response should be nothing. Do not defend, do not attack. Document everything, but react to nothing. Let them think their action had no effect. Meanwhile, analyze what happened, why, and what response would truly address it. Then wait for the optimal moment. When they're vulnerable, when you're strong, when the action can be complete. Partial revenge only creates an ongoing war. Delayed, total response ends the conflict permanently. Second, practice emotional discipline. Train yourself not to react in the moment. The person who can absorb a blow and smile while planning their response is infinitely more dangerous than the one who lashes out immediately. The 20th law is about transcending individual vulnerability. Become a system, not a man. Embed yourself so deeply into the structure, into processes and dependencies, that removing you would collapse everything. Make yourself not just useful, but architectural. This works because systems are harder to remove than individuals. Fire a person and they're gone. But remove someone who's become part of the system and you inherit chaos. Institutional knowledge, relationships, processes, and informal power structures all collapse. The cost of removal exceeds the benefit. You've achieved a form of immunity through indispensability. Consider how this manifests in organizations. The IT person who's the only one who understands the legacy system, the assistant who knows where everything is and how everything works, the connector who's the bridge between departments. These people often have more job security than higher-ranking officials because they're not just filling a role, they are the infrastructure. In political systems, this is the bureaucrat who outlasts elected officials because the institution can't function without them. Your path to implementation. Don't just do your job. Make yourself integral to how the job gets done. Build relationships across power structures. Be the person who knows how things actually work, not just officially, but unofficially. Control information flows. Be present at crucial junctures. Make your knowledge tacit rather than documented, so it can't be easily transferred. Second, help others succeed in ways that tie their success to your involvement. If multiple people's achievements depend on your contribution, you've created multiple stakeholders in your position. You're no longer one person, you're the foundation supporting many. Removing you becomes politically and practically impossible. The 21st and final law is about becoming fear itself. Make them afraid to say your name. Don't seek fame. Seek to become a ghost, a shadow, a reference that changes the atmosphere. When people consider crossing you, they should feel a chill they can't explain. This works because mystery plus consequences equals legend. When your actual methods are unknown but your outcomes are visible, imagination fills the gap with something more terrifying than reality. You become not a person, but a force, an inevitability, something primal that triggers instinct rather than rational assessment. Think about how certain individuals achieve this: the investor who ruins companies without visible effort, the operative who ends careers through means no one can trace, the opponent who always seems to know things they shouldn't, to be 3 moves ahead, to have reach that extends impossibly far. These people may not have supernatural abilities, but the perception that they might is as effective as if they did. Reputation becomes reality. Your final implementation. Never fully explain how you achieved something significant. Let others speculate. Occasionally demonstrate knowledge you shouldn't have, or influence where you shouldn't have access. This reinforces the perception of invisible reach. Second, be absolutely unpredictable in who you help and who you oppose. If people can't predict where you'll apply your power, everyone must consider the possibility of being your target. This universal uncertainty is universal deference. You've achieved what true power looks like, not constant application of force, but the omnipresent possibility of it. The threat that never needs to be made because it's always implied. Now we've reached the end of this journey, but it's really a beginning. You came here to learn how to manipulate situations. What you've received is far more than that. You've been given a map of the invisible battlefield where all human interactions occur. You now see the mechanisms of influence, the architecture of control, the skeleton beneath the flesh of social dynamics. But knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential. What you do with these principles determines whether you've wasted your time or transformed your life. These laws are amoral. They can be used to protect yourself, to advance good causes, or to pursue selfish ends. The ethics are yours to determine. The effectiveness is guaranteed by centuries of proof. So here's what I want you to do. This is important. In the comments below, I want you to make a public commitment, not to me, but to yourself. Type something simple but powerful. I will be rich, or never broke again, or whatever represents the transformation you're pursuing. Why? Because public commitment changes behavior. When you declare something publicly, psychological pressure to remain consistent with that declaration increases your follow-through dramatically. This isn't superstition. It's behavioral psychology. You're using social accountability as a tool for personal change. The same mechanisms we've discussed throughout this video can be turned inward for self-improvement. You're creating your own complicity with your future self. Like this video if you found value here. Subscribe if you want to continue down this path. But more importantly, review these principles regularly. Watch this video again in a month. The patterns we've discussed will start appearing everywhere once you're trained to see them. You'll notice them in your boss's behavior, in your relationships, in media, in politics. The world will look different because you'll see the code running beneath the surface. Remember this: everyone is playing the game. The only question is whether you're aware you're playing. Now you are. Use it wisely, use it well. And never forget that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who understands all of this and appears to understand none of it. The game is yours now. Play it like you mean it. Don't forget to give a like or a hype and subscribe to the channel. Watch the next video to complete everything you just learned.